How's it going, Charger fans? Welcome back to another weekly injury update. Again, my name is Jamieson O'Marr. You can find my content at Chargers Medical on Twitter. And today I will be bringing you again another update on last week's injuries, as well as a discussion about the upcoming injuries to the Titans and how that could potentially affect the gameplay. Quick comment on last week's game. Obviously, tough loss. It was good to see the Chargers play some bang up offense. Like it was fun to see the running game going, see Ekeler and Kelly get involved, see the offensive line absolutely dominate on that end of the ball. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do on the defense, and it'll be interesting to see how Staley and that side of the ball responds. But there's also some injuries, unfortunately, that we have to discuss on that side of the ball and how that might affect the gameplay this upcoming week. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Put last week behind us and move on to hopefully greener pastures this week. Apologies. Here we go. Week 2 updates. So we're going to start with a quick update on Austin Ekeler, what we can expect this week and what I expect moving forward. Talk a little bit about ankle sprains and sort of the methodology about how those happen and the different types that are commonly occur in activity and in NFL games, but are the exact distinction between the different types are very relevant in terms of recovery. So we'll talk about the type that he suffered and what that could mean moving forward. We'll talk about hamstring injuries. Unfortunately, an extremely common injury in the NFL and something the Chargers have been dealing with. And so we'll talk about Kendricks, Bosa, Henley. I forgot to add Rumph here, but this Rumph also has a hamstring injury. So that's 4 players, 4 starters that the Chargers are dealing with right now. So we'll talk again briefly about them because we've discussed them before. And we'll finish up with a little look at the upcoming injury report and take a look at some of the Titans injuries. All right. So let's talk about Austin Ekeler. Let's, rip the Band-Aid off first. There's been some reporting recently as of this afternoon that he is doubtful to play. And the reports are that he will not even be traveling with the team. So per NFL standards, if a player is listed as doubtful, it's likely that they have about 20% or less chance of playing that game. So even if he did travel with the team, I wouldn't expect him to play. So we will likely not see him this week. But he has the glass half full view of this is he has what commonly is described as a lateral or a low ankle sprain. This is in contrast to a high ankle sprain, which is a more severe injury. A low ankle sprain, as you can see on the left side of here, you have a number of ligaments in your ankle, a ton of them really. But when you roll your ankle in the most common way, which is when your foot goes outward, so you kind of roll to the outside of your ankle, you commonly injure this anterior talofibular ligament, sometimes called the ATFL. That ligament is one of the first things to go when you injure your ankle. And if you have a more severe ankle roll, you can break some of the bones, including the fibula and tibia as well. The indications for Ekeler is that was not the case, but he probably did, damage some of these ligaments during the injury. The NFL data suggests that players with this type of injury can return in usually anywhere between 7 to 10 days on average. Most players will miss out 0 to 1 games, so that they could, if it happens and it's not that severe, this is something that you could tape up to return some of that stability and allow them to play through. But it does, depend player to player and swelling and how they're feeling. I don't expect this to be a long-term injury. I fully expect Ekeler to get at least some work in practice next week and likely play against the Vikings in week 3. And if you have a high ankle sprain, which is where you actually injure some of what we call syndesmotic ligaments, which are the structures that keep the fibula and tibia together, which is very critical for ankle stability. So if you have a high ankle sprain, your ankle is actually unstable. And that's a more serious injury. You need to allow, 4 to 6 weeks generally for that to heal back together. And those are injuries that you can't really just tape up and allow you to play because your ankle is unstable and there's risk for serious injury and dislocation and if you were to keep kind of weight bearing and playing on that. So that's not what he has. Again, reassuring. He's what's called a low or lateral ankle sprain. Hopefully we'll see him back in week 3, but he will not be playing this week. Hamstring injuries. So we've kind of beat this horse to death, unfortunately, and we've talked a lot about it, which makes sense. This is one of the most common injuries in the NFL. There's multiple players that have this week. There's two distinctions. Joey Bosa is listed as questionable versus all the other players that have them were listed as doubtful and I think are unlikely to play. If I had to put my money on it, I would expect that Joey Bosa would not play in this game as well, just based on his injury history, based on how nagging these injuries can be, and how the average games miss is actually about 2.6, so closer to 3 for from onset of these injuries. So if we start the clock, some of these players, including Dan Henley and Chris Rumph, we might be expecting to see get some more work and potentially play in week 3. Kendricks as well. This is being the first game he missed. Joey Bosa as well. This would be the first game that he missed. And so as any injury, there's a spectrum here. Some players will go back and play the very next week. So it's not, impossible that Joey plays this week. It's just, I think, given his injury history and the length of the season and kind of how these injuries can especially, worsen if a restrain was to occur. I think the Chargers will be conservative here. They are a little thin at edge rusher if Chris Rumph and Joey Bosa were to miss. And so we'll see kind of whether that factors into the decision-making at all. But expect, these group of players to slowly work their way back. I expect to see a lot of them back at practice next week and hopefully get some meaningful reps. And then that we'll kind of have to see how that plays out before we make kind of just determinations for week 3. Which is unfortunate. These hamstring injuries will continue to be a nagging issue, and we'll see, how they're managed. It's again also not a Chargers issue. I think the NFL says on average they suffer between 150 to 200 hamstring injuries over the course of a season. That's the NFL as a whole. And if you divide that up accordingly, that's probably anywhere from 5 to 7 players per team per year. So that's a lot. But something that the NFL is trying to, consistently work through and discuss. And so we'll see kind of where these group of players go, but just something that happens. Interestingly, I was looking up some positional data. It's more common in players that tend to do more sprinting. So I think DBs and wide receivers primarily, but it does happen across the board. So we'll see quarterbacks, running backs, and sometimes even defensive linemen, and offensive linemen, to a lesser degree, based on the level of time that player spends sprinting in their sort of game time activities. So we have a kind of a group of edge rushers and linebackers here, which is a little bit atypical. But again, no injury is the same. So what happens. All right. Let's take a look at the week 2 injury report heading into the weekend and going into this game. Most of the players on the Chargers list are doubtful, and I don't expect any of those players to play. Again, based on the average, most of these players shouldn't play. Joey Bosa is the only one who's listed as questionable. He will probably go down to what's considered a game time decision on Sunday and probably be evaluated before he plays. Although, given kind of all the extenuating circumstances, I do expect him to probably rest this week, whether that's a personal decision or a medical team decision to shut him down. But this is we're in week 2 of a 17-week season, and the Chargers do need an edge rush. It did not show up last week, and I don't know if we can blame that all on the defensive linemen themselves, the edge rushers themselves, but they're going to need them, and they'll hopefully have some more time in the pocket. I don't expect Tannehill to be passing the ball quite as quickly out of his hands like Tua did last week. However, they'll probably be running the ball more. And so these players will need to be able to be, strong enough to set the edge and things like that. So Joey Bosa probably going to be listed as what's called a game time decision. We'll go down to game time. But again, I don't expect him to play. Moving over to the Titans side of the ball, we do have 2 players listed as out. Those are both defensive backs, Kristen Fulton and Monty Hooker. So that's a starting safety and a starting cornerback the Titans will not have. DeAndre Hopkins is listed as questionable. He didn't practice at all this week. He's suffering an ankle sprain similar to Austin Ekeler, a low-grade ankle sprain. It is possible he plays, but these players, again, wide receivers, if you think about all the cutting and speed that they need to have some amount of more stability in that ankle than say a offensive lineman would necessarily need to have. So I think based on the research that I did and kind of what the vibes were coming from the Titans beat reporters and things like that, I don't think he will play. But again, I could be wrong. We might see him out here, see him out on the field. But if he does play, I do expect him to be a little bit 80%, if you will, not playing at full, either full snap count or a level of activity. But DeAndre Hopkins, obviously a legend in the game. 80% DeAndre is probably better than a lot of wide receivers in the league. So he could still be a threat, but it'll be something to keep an eye on before game time. And the other kind of questionable injury is this offensive lineman, Peter Skoronski. Nothing really to say there. He got an illness. Really hard to gauge those, but usually illness is anywhere from 4 to 7 days. So if he's feeling better by Sunday, maybe he'll play. I'm not too sure. All right, that's all I got. Quick update this week. A little bit more information on Ekeler, another discussion on hamstrings. Hopefully we can stop talking about those at some point in the future, and in a deep dive into the Titans injury report. So hope you learned something today. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, or leave a comment. I'm happy to answer them. I appreciate all the kind words from the fans out there. It means a lot. This is something that I enjoy talking about, and I appreciate the platform that the Guilty Charge podcast has offered me. So big shout out to Tyler and Steven and the rest of the team. I'm excited for the season. I'm excited to hopefully get a W this week. We'll see how we play out in Nashville. So until next week, guys, this is at Charges Medical, Jamieson O'Marr signing off.